Okay, we're going to talk about our last section in chapter 2/3. This one is section 3.3. It's about energy in cells. Okay, so as we've talked previously, cells, like all living things, need to use energy. And the way that most of the organisms on the planet do that is through taking chemical energy that is stored in food and they change it into energy that can be used. Okay? Chemical energy comes from the chemical bonds that are in the food that we eat. Now, we as people, we are consumers. Remember, there are two kinds of living things. Consumers are organisms that make their own, or excuse me, consumers are organisms that need to eat for food, or they need to eat food for energy, like us. We get the energy from the food that we eat directly. Sorry. And then producers, like plants, they actually make their own food. Okay, they make their food from the sun and from the things in their surroundings. They use sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water for that process. But no matter whether you're talking about a producer or a consumer, the energy that is needed and used is right there. It's known as metabolism. Okay, that right there is what we call metabolism, is the total amount of energy that an organism uses. So whether it's a flower, it uses energy to grow and to make seeds so that it can make more flowers. That is its metabolism. Or it's a seal pup that's growing and changing. It uses its metabolism, is what is the total amount of energy. Sometimes students your guys' age are said to have a high metabolism, and maybe some of you have even heard that. People with a high metabolism tend to eat a lot. That's because they use lots of energy. Okay, students your age are eating more than people my age because you guys are in the process of growing and your bodies are growing and you use lots of energy, and that is what metabolism is. So if you are very active, you need more food, which means you have a higher metabolism. Okay, so that's an important thing. Now, where all of this energy comes from is an important thing to understand. Okay, it comes primarily from this very important process called photosynthesis and respiration. We have talked before about photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process that producers, like plants, they change light energy, right here, light energy into chemical energy, which is food energy. Okay, so during photosynthesis, plants take in several things. Okay, they take in carbon dioxide and water. Those are the physical things that they take in, and they use the energy from sunlight. Okay, so those three things, they take carbon dioxide and water, and then they use the energy from sunlight to make something called sugar. Okay, sugar is the food that plants actually make. These two things right here, where the stars are, these I don't believe are in your notes. So make sure that you add those in your notes. Maybe on the back page or somewhere where you can find some space. You need to make sure you get those into your notes somewhere. Now, many producers have a green pigment called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll, remember, is the green stuff. That's what makes plants green. Chlorophyll is found in the chloroplasts of plants. Remember, chloroplast is one of the organelles we talked about last chapter that plants have that animals don't. Okay, chlorophyll is in the chloroplast. These two things, chloroplasts and chlorophyll, that is actually what allows plants to do this process of photosynthesis. Okay. So photosynthesis is, again, a process where plants use energy from the sun, carbon dioxide from the air, and water from the ground to make sugar that is then used for them to grow. That's how they get energy. Now, as a consumer like us, we take in stored energy by eating things. So we eat producers like plants, and we eat other consumers like animals. Okay, so we eat that stuff, and that goes into our bodies where then we can metabolize it or change it into chemical energy that we can use. Now, there's a big diagram that we need to draw that shows the process of photosynthesis and respiration. So let's go ahead and start drawing that. Okay, so we're going to start out with the photosynthesis process here. So photosynthesis happens in plants. Okay, so we have a nice little flower that's drawn here. In the process of photosynthesis, you can see this whole half, this side here on the left is photosynthesis. Plants take in three things. They take in CO2, which is the chemical formula for carbon dioxide. They take in H2O, which is the chemical formula for water. So plants take in those two things, CO2 and H2O. They go into the chloroplast of a plant. Remember, this is the organelle, the chloroplast, inside of a plant that actually does photosynthesis. The third thing plants take in is sunlight. Okay, it's light energy that comes from the sun. Okay, so plants take in three things: carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight, number three. And it all goes into the chloroplast. The process that happens inside the chloroplast is called photosynthesis, and plants then make two things. Okay, plants make sugar, which is C6H12O6. All right, that's the chemical formula for sugar. And they also make oxygen, which is O2. The sugar right here, the first thing that plants make, plants use this as energy to grow. All right, that's what they use. That's what gets stored in their bodies. And that's actually what we would get from plants if we eat them. Oxygen is a waste product that's actually released into the air. Okay, so we're just going to talk about this process on the left called photosynthesis right now. But plants, they take in three things. Number one is carbon dioxide. Number two is water, H2O. And number three is sunlight. All of this goes to a chloroplast, and that chloroplast then turns these things into two products. One is C6H12O6, which is sugar, and the second is O2, which is oxygen. Okay, we'll come back to this diagram in just a moment. Okay, so the plants do this photosynthesis process, and then they're consumed by animals, consumers. And this is all known as the food chain or the food web. We talked about that previously. That is just how energy is transferred. That's known as the food web. The start of the food web, as we have mentioned previously, is always going to be the sun. Okay, the sun and then a producer. That is what is always going to start the food chain or the food web, because the sun gives energy to plants, and then plants give energy to animals. Okay, now in order for the energy from a plant to get released, there needs to be a process called cellular respiration. Okay, cellular respiration is the process where organisms break down food in their cells and use that energy. They use that energy from the food to live. Okay. This is always happening, of course, in the mitochondria. Remember that. That's something we've talked about a few times this chapter already. In the mitochondria is where respiration happens. So respiration takes the sugar. Okay, that's what this is. And that glucose is sugar, which is C6H12O6. So during respiration, that sugar that was made in photosynthesis is used along with oxygen in the mitochondria to provide energy for the organism. So during respiration, food molecules are broken down, it releases the energy that's in there, and then it also releases two things, one of them being carbon dioxide and the second being water. Okay, so going back to our diagram here, remember photosynthesis is on the left. After photosynthesis happens, respiration occurs. So over here on the right side of this is a process known as respiration. So during respiration, whether it happens in an animal like our super strong farmer person here, or in a plant, plants do respiration as well, whether it happens primarily in animals, or whatever, that they take in two things. Two things are always taken in for respiration. First thing taken in during respiration is right here, sugar, C6H12O6. That is taken in along with oxygen from the air, and that goes into the organelle called the mitochondria. Remember, the mitochondria is the power plant of the cell. It provides energy. So in the mitochondria, these two things are taken and broken apart, and it releases energy. This is what the cell will use to live. This is what you use to live. That's where you get your energy from. And it also makes two other things. Okay? It makes carbon dioxide, which is CO2, and water. Those two things are released. Like whenever you breathe out carbon dioxide. That's a waste product from your cells. Okay? And water is a waste product also that gets released from your body. And all of this stuff then can be recycled into plants for photosynthesis. So it ends up going back to plants. Plants use it to make sugar and oxygen, which animals then use for respiration, and then back and round and round and round and round again. And remember, this is called the photosynthesis respiration cycle. It's a cycle because it goes around in a circle. It doesn't end anywhere. It keeps going back and forth. We as animals need plants because plants provide us with the sugar and oxygen needed for respiration. Plants need animals because we provide carbon dioxide and water that they need for photosynthesis. So it's a cycle that we will always have. Okay. Finally, this is something that you should write down, and we will talk about more in class. These are something called chemical equations. This is the same thing as our diagram. It shows photosynthesis. Remember, photosynthesis, plants take in two things. They take carbon dioxide and water, and then they use sunlight as a form of energy, and they release, that's why we have this arrow here, they release sugar and oxygen. Okay, this is just like a math equation that shows the chemicals involved in this process. Carbon dioxide, water makes sugar and oxygen. All right, and then the flip of that is respiration. We have sugar taken in, oxygen taken in, and then it releases carbon dioxide, water, and energy that's used inside the cell. So again, you need to make sure you add that to your notes somewhere too. As always, you can pause this, you can rewatch it, you can watch it in different chunks, but just make sure you're following along with your notes to get all of these items in there. Perfect.